Hello, this is Rashad Mitchell. This is the Rashad Mitchell Show. This is my second podcast for today. Obviously, it'll be my last of the day. I thank everyone for listening, who are listening right now, and those who are going to be listening later on. This is Rashad Mitchell on the Rashad Mitchell Show. 5 o'clock, it's a little after 5 o'clock. Thank you for listening. I'm here to talk about no sports or anything that comes to mind. This show is going to be different. Maybe reading some excerpts from my books or reading excerpts from other books that I have that I didn't write. So I might be doing a lot of different things today on this 45-minute show. Number one, the recap earlier today, I talked about the Black Panther documentary that I watched this past Tuesday, which was an interesting documentary about the vanguard of the revolution. And then I talked about the NBA and recap my blogs that I wrote. So it's all good, man. I just thank you for listening. Whoever's listening right now, who's going to be listening later. I have a book that I bought a few years back, and it's called the Who's Better, Who's Best in Football, setting the record straight on the top 60 NFL players of the past 60 years by Steve Silverman. It's a very good book, and it deals with him just setting the record straight, who was the best 60 NFL players in the last 60 years. And I'm looking at it, number 48, got an interesting player in Rod Woodson, who played cornerback, safety, a big time player, I think he's in the Hall of Fame right now. Yeah, Woodson did a lot on the football field. First of all, he was great at shutting down opposing receivers. Well, that was his job to do. That was his first job. He could play physical at the line of scrimmage. He can play the trail technique. He can go the quarterback into thinking the receiver was open, and then all of a sudden Woodson would intercept the pass. He could do a lot of things in the secondary, play straight coverage, handle the multiple moves, and stay with the receiver step for step. Also, he was a tackler of the highest order, especially in the running game, and one of the top returners of his time. So he was an all-pro cornerback. He played, the safety position. He closed out his career there at that position, and he was one of the best cornerbacks the game has ever seen. He's one of the best safeties. So for 17 seasons, Rod Woodson played with the Pittsburgh Steelers, San Francisco 49ers, the Baltimore Ravens. Actually, he played on that Baltimore Raven defense. That was probably one of the greatest, if not the best defense for a single season. Because he played with them from 1998 to 2001. Then he played for the Oakland Raiders. But he's truly a Pittsburgh Steeler through and through. That was his longest tenure in the NFL, was what he did with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Woodson had 71 interceptions. He had 1,483 interception return yards, 2,362 punt return yards, and 17 non-offensive touchdowns. He reached the end zone 12 interceptions returns, 12 times. It was an NFL record. I don't know if it's still an NFL record. No, he had 1 fumble return, 2 punt returns, and 2 kickoff returns. He was on an all-decade team for the 90s. He was named to the Pro Bowl 11 times. 1994, after just 7 years as an NFL corner, was just one of 5 active players to be named to the NFL 75th anniversary team. And the others was Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Reggie White, and Ronnie Lott. And Wilson went to the University of Pittsburgh. He was a 10th overall pick in 1987. And he enjoyed that. He came with age in the NFL because pass coverage was more physical at that time. So in the winning event, he was beaten for a few steps, but he can adjust. He was not averse to like putting his hands on a receiver. He even once said that if they ran by you, you could push them, slow them up. So how could you ever get beat deep? Wouldn't that be fun? You could terrify receivers. But there are more restrictions that was put on defensive backs because Wilson made every adjustment he needed to, and he really lost the battles that he had against a receiver. So he was like a tone setter for the Steelers, and even teammates like DJ Johnson understood that, who used to play with the Steelers. He had Pro Bowl appearances from 1992 to 1993. But at that time, he started to recognize his ability to make plays and started scheming against, the opponents that was trying to, scheme against him. So they would refrain from throwing to his side of the field out of fear because they knew he was going to intercept the ball or force a fumble. So Bill Cowher, who was the head coach of the Steelers at the time, changed Woodson's role and made him a hybrid cornerback safety, so he could find the ball and make plays even if the receiver he was covering was not involved in the play. So Cowher's instructions were not, specific, but he just told Woodson he needed to find the ball and make the plays. So Woodson overall, man, he was a great player in the secondary, one of the great players in the league. Now he was dealing with some adversity at the time in 1995. He had tore his anterior cruciate ligament. It had threatened his playing days, but yeah, he kind of lost the same quickness, and he had to move back to free safety, and he became one of the best at that position, whether it was with the 49ers, the Ravens, and the Raiders. But his memorable season was in 2000, his third season with the Ravens, and that year he won the Super Bowl. And obviously played with Ray Lewis, who was in the prime of his career. Wilson had 77 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, and 4 interceptions. And he gave Baltimore's defense the confidence that if the pass rush didn't get to the quarterback, Woodson would make the play in the secondary. So he was a dominant player, Rod Woodson, from beginning, the middle, and to the end. He was just that consistent. So that's Rod Woodson. Yeah, I'm going to talk about some of these players. Just switch it up a little bit. Look at some NFL players. You never know what I will be talking about on this show, but it's my show. I can talk about anything. So, yes, the NFL season is over, but it doesn't mean I have to stop talking about the NFL. I can still do that. Now, the next person is Fran Tarkenton, who to me is very underrated as a quarterback because he's the guy that set all the records. I think Dan Marino broke a record that was set by a Fran Tarkenton. Because Fran Tarkenton was the career leader in touchdown passes, which was broken by Dan Marino, I think, in 1995. But anyway, Fran Tarkenton was drafted in the 3rd round out of the University of Georgia. in 1961. Now, Tarkenton was a small quarterback. He was, listed at 6 feet and 185 pounds. And Tarkenton had a difficult time seeing over bigger defensive linemen when protected. When the protection would break down, he had a difficult time looking over the defensive linemen. But anyway, moving along, he was great at scrambling to the left and throwing. Sometimes he was great at scrambling to the right, and then he would throw, or he would just take off and run. He had a style that was effective, that was a thrilling, exciting thing to the fans. But it did, take off at the time. The coach that was coaching him, Norm Van Brocklin, he didn't, feel too good about the scrambling ability and the running ability of Fran Tarkenton. So that's how he was in the pocket. He wanted to stay in the pocket. Van Brocklin, he wanted Fran Tarkenton to stay in the pocket, and he needed to stay in the pocket to be effective. But he never appreciated the gifts that Tarkenton had. Tarkenton just had that great ability to just make a guy miss. So Tarkenton was a great leader who helped make the Vikings an exciting team in their early years, even if they did suffer the normal tough times and difficulties as an expansion team. But his ability to escape the pressure and buy time to throw gave his receivers a chance to break containment and get open. Now, Tarkenton made huge plays that will sometimes take 10 to 15 seconds to develop. NFL films has so much, films about the highlights of Tarkenton for his ability to keep a play alive and the things that he would do to get, spell time to get the ball to a receiver. He played nearly every game from 1961 to 1976. Let's see here. He was a league MVP in 1975. He held records as far as and he held the records. See, this is what makes him underrated. When you talk about the greatest quarterbacks, they don't really talk about him. He played 13 seasons with the Vikings. He played 5 with the New York Giants. And when he retired, he left the game with these records. Check this out. For most games played, 246. For most passing yards, 47,003. Most touchdown passes, 342. Most completions, 3,686. Most attempts, 6,647. And most rushing yards by a quarterback, 3,674. Now, Dan Marino did break the record that Tarkenton had, but more than 30 years after his retirement, at that time, he was still standing. At the time this book was written, because this book was written a few years ago, it was still standing at 3rd all time in touchdown passes and 5th in passing yards, 8th in completions and 4th in rushing yards by a quarterback. Even though, Tarkenton's style of play was criticized by Norm Van Brocklin, it was still accepted by Bud Grant. Because when Tarkenton came back to the Vikings for the final third of his career in 1972, he was respected, despite, playing for the Giants, which were, they were 33-37 over 5 seasons in New York. And he was able to lead them to Super Bowls. They went to the Super Bowl a few times while he was the quarterback of the Vikings in the 70s. See, the thing is, he didn't win a Super Bowl, but he went up against the best teams of all time. When you look at Tarkenton, when he was the quarterback of the Vikings, they went to 3 Super Bowls. and he went up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who will go on to be the team of the 70s. The Miami Dolphins, who was great at their time. He won 2 Super Bowls in a row, including 3 consecutive Super Bowl appearances. And then they had to deal with the Oakland Raiders, a team that was always consistent as a winner in the NFL. So, standing in their way was these great teams. So it's tough to ask a lot from a quarterback to perform at a high level, but altogether it doesn't diminish the legacy of Tarkenton, that he was such an innovator and he was so creative as a quarterback, because his style had put together and launched a new philosophy in the NFL that is still normal and likely to remain for quarterbacks if they want to run and scramble, because you can still run. You look at Cam Newton, you see he runs with his legs and beats you with his arms. Same thing with Russell Wilson. That ability to buy time in order to give their receivers to make a play. I mean, that's what he did. He had the ability to just run the football as a quarterback. I mean, again, this guy had 32 rushing touchdowns, including 3,674 rushing yards. I mean, that gets no better than that. That's wonderful. So when you look at that aspect of Tarkenton's career, Tarkenton was a great player in his own right, but I think, to me, he's underrated. So the next guy we look at is another linebacker who needs no introduction. He's a 4-time Super Bowl champion. He was one of the meanest, toughest linebackers to ever play the game, Jack Lambert. I got him as number 46. Yeah, he was one of the toughest, meanest players to ever play, Jack Lambert. He was a dominant player. He was a great leader for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Wore number 58. He was similar to Dick Butkus, because he had that ability to run from sideline to sideline to punish ball carriers. The thing about this guy, that he went to Kent State, and he only weighed 204 pounds when he was drafted, but he was 6'4", and he was skinny still at the same time. Now, he had remarkable speed, great athlete as an inside linebacker. He was one of the toughest guys out there, man. He was just one of the most feared defensive players that you had to deal with on the offensive side of the ball when you faced him on the defensive side of the ball. So he was very tough. He was very intense as a linebacker you're ever going to see this game has ever known. But in 1976, the Steelers had the best defense the NFL has ever seen at that time. They gave up only 138 points, 38 fewer than the Minnesota Vikings, who were the runners-up in that category. Steelers that season with a 1-4 record before winning their final 9 games. They registered 5 shutouts in that span, gave up 6 points in one other game and 3 points in 2 others. The Steelers were the number 1 statistical defense in the league that season, allowing 237.4 yards per game, 13 first downs per game, and 104.1 rushing yards per game. They only gave up 5 rushing touchdowns all season. And Jack Lambert was named the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year. That's why I bring this up about Jack Lambert, is that he was able to do great things as a linebacker for a team that might have been the best defensive team ever. He was Rookie of the Year in 1974, Jack Lambert, 9-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro 6 times. I mean, he was the guy. He was the most dominant player on the most dominant defense. Because Mean Joe Green was breaking down a little bit. He was not the same player as time went on, so he had to be that guy. When you look at a guy like Jack Lambert. So the guys that I looked at so far is Rod Woodson, Fran Tarkenton, Jack Lambert. What do you think of these three players? Where would you rank them on your list if you did a top 50 list of the best NFL players in the last 60 years? Where would you put a Woodson? Where would you put a Lambert? Where would you put a Tarkenton on a list? It's a very interesting list. And so Jack Lambert, Fran Tarkenton, and Rod Woodson are the guys I just discussed. We're gonna do this for the remainder of the show. Like I said, this is the Rashad Mitchell show. I'm gonna keep on just doing my thing with this the best way I can, because that's what it's about. It's all about just getting stuff out there and doing what I love to do. You know what I'm saying? Just get it out there so that I can be diverse and talk about different topics no matter what. So it is what it is. So that's the story on that. The next person I'm going to talk about is when this guy wrote this book is a guy from the Oakland Raiders, Gene Upshaw, one of the best offensive linemen to ever play the game. He played alongside Art Shell. Yeah, the guy who wrote this book was talking about Gene Upshaw. He thought he was the 45th best player in the last 60 years. Those who are listening, who are going to be listening later, what do you think of that? Do you think he should be higher? Because I didn't see Gene Upshaw play, but I'm familiar with the offensive line that he played around and with. That was he was a dominant player. Didn't go to the biggest college in his career as a football player, but he became a great, all-time great offensive lineman, Gene Upshaw. Because also, obviously, he's remembered for his leadership as a part of the NFL Players Association, and all of that. But we're not gonna get into stuff like that because his career was controversial when he was a union leader and a negotiator. But this is all about what he did on the football field as an offensive guard for the Oakland Raiders. Now, he won a couple of Super Bowls, but first and foremost, he went to Texas A&I. He was 17th overall pick of the 1967 NFL draft. And Al Davis felt that he was a good fit for the offensive line because he felt he could block Kansas City Chiefs, the defensive tackle at the time, Buck Buchanan, who was one of the most destructive defensive linemen in the league. So the Raiders had nobody who can fit that bill, who can block him. So he saw Upshaw as that guy because he was 6'5", 255 pounds. He felt he had the speed, the quickness, and the blocking ability to deal with, Buchanan. Obviously, he turned out to be correct. He played alongside Art Shell, and he was great on that weak side when they would run the football, and they were so dominant. But back to Upshaw, he was a dominant offensive guard in the AFL. This is before the AFL and the NFL merged in 1970. So he always proved that he was one of the best guards, if not the best, guard in football. He was a great run blocker. He was great at leading the Raiders sweep when running backs like Mark Van Eeken and Clarence Davis would run the ball, and giving the protection necessary for Darryl LaMonca and Ken Stabler to complete their passes. He was a great player. He held it down at that left guard spot for 15 seasons, and he played in 207 consecutive regular season games. So that was, shows you the Iron Man ability of this guy. He was first team and second team all league, all conference, 11 consecutive years, and he was a 7-time Pro Bowler. Gene Upshaw, and he was a very intense, intelligent, dedicated competitor. And he just used his, size and his speed to his ability, to his advantage. And he was on dominant teams that the Raiders had at the time, because the Raiders, when he was playing for the Raiders, Upshaw, they made it to the playoffs 10 out of 11 seasons that Upshaw was on the team, and they won 9 division titles, including a Super Bowl championship in 1976, which is 40 years ago. And they went 13-1, beat the Minnesota Vikings. He played on that offensive line led by, like I said, Gene Upshaw and Art Shell. They did a great job against that Vikings defensive line. Alan Page and Jim Marshall, who were the best two of the best defensive linemen in the NFL, and they didn't do that much. They did not even get a sack or a tackle or a pass deflection or a forced fumble. That was total completion of the dominance of the Raiders' offensive line that day. They won 32-13. So that's Gene Upshaw's legacy. There's another guy that's interesting. Is Bart Starr. Steve Silverman had Bart Starr at number 44. I think that's kind of low, but he is underrated. As a performer, as a quarterback in general. This guy won 5 NFL championships, played for the Green Bay Packers, and he probably led the greatest drive a quarterback can ever, lead a team. And that was in the Ice Bowl in 1967, on December 31st. Because the thing about Bart Starr is that the most passes they ever threw in a season was 295. The most touchdown passes he ever threw was 16 touchdown passes. But again, back in the 60s, it was different back then with the passing game, especially in NFL. But Starr won 5 NFL championships in a 7-year period, including 3 in a row. How many NFL quarterbacks ever did that? Not Tom Brady, not Peyton Manning, not Joe Montana or Terry Bradshaw. Nobody ever won more as he did. And also, Bart Starr may be more responsible for turning the NFL into a passing league than any other player. And the reason why, because of the ground attack that he played with Jim Taylor as a fullback, Paul Hornung at running back, Chuck Marcin and Donnie Anderson and Jim Grabowski. They were a running team. When Vince Lombardi was the coach, they averaged 3.4 yards per carry in 1965. 8.2 yards per pass average was the second, highly second. It was second in the league in per pass average, 8.2. So they averaged 3.5 yards per carry in 1966, ranking 14th in the league. They finished first in the league in yards per pass at 8.9. So in 1967, the Packers finished 4th in yards per rushing attempt at 4.0. 0 per carry. So it was a big improvement over the past 2 seasons. So he finished first in the league with an average of 8.3 yards per pass, and even Star averaged 8.7 yards per pass. So when you look at Star over his career as a whole, he averaged 7.8 yards per attempt for his career, which is a better figure than Dan Marino, Peyton Manning, Joe Montana, or Terry Bradshaw at that time when his book was written. And he was accurate in every big game. He was 9-1 in the postseason. He was MVP of the Super Bowl, the first 2 Super Bowls, but his most memorable performance was obviously in the Ice Bowl, because it was very cold. And under those conditions, he was able to, lead his team down the field and do his thing. He went 5 for 5 for 59 yards, and he ran into sneaked into the end zone over guard Jerry Kramer. Quarterback sneak, probably the best quarterback sneak touchdown you're ever going to see. He scores a touchdown, and the Packers win the Ice Bowl. And plus, he wasn't a high draft pick. He was drafted in the 17th round in 1956 out of Alabama. Also, he was a guy that had good mechanics. He was an accurate passer, had great arm strength, and ability to handle skills with the ball. He read defenses well and made great decisions. So, despite him not throwing the football a lot, it was just a different time back then. But he was able to win as a quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. So, yeah, I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks or players in general to ever play this game. Bart Starr. Next guy is Chuck Bednarik. He had him at number 43. And he talks about Chuck Bednarik, who's like the last of the 60-minute men, played 2 ways. And he was a tough guy. One of the meanest guys you're ever going to face on a football field. I mean, he played for the Philadelphia Eagles, and even Jim Brown said that Chuck Bednarik was as great a linebacker who has ever lived. And Bednarik was a unique player because he was the last of the 2-way players. He played center on offense. He played middle linebacker on defense. He was called the last 60-minute man. He played every snap on offense, every snap on defense. He was on the sidelines for kickoffs. But at the same time, he was on the field on offense and defense. 1960 NFL Championship game, he was on the field for more than 58 game minutes. And he was best known for obviously the knockout hit he put on Frank Gifford in a game in 1960. And also the last second tackle he made of Jim Taylor that preserved the title over the Green Bay Packers. But the hit that he put on Gifford was in Yankee Stadium. I mean, it was a battle for the Eastern Conference at the time. And the Eagles were winning, 17-10. He just laid them out, knocked them out. So, and the image of that hit that he put on Gifford was that he stood over him. It was a photo that Bednarik was celebrating the damage he had done to Gifford, but he was reacting to his team's recovery of the ball and the fact that it ensured the victory for Philadelphia at that time in that game. So he was the last of the 60-minute men, man. This guy, during his 14-year career, only missed 3 games. He was very durable. He suffered a lot with his hands because his hands was not extended straight out. They were either bent, gnawed, or misshapen. So he was a tough guy. Simple as that. Chuck McNerick. The last 60-minute man. There's nowhere else to slice it, man. This guy was unique. Now, next guy he had on this list was Thurman Thomas at number 42. Now, Thurman Thomas was a guy who was the first player who had to endure on live TV in front of ESPN cameras in the green room in 1988. He was passed up by a lot of teams. So he was drafted as the 40th overall pick in the second round. He came out of Oklahoma State, and he would go on to have a Hall of Fame career, including 4 consecutive Super Bowl appearances. And Thomas was one of the best running backs of his time, man, and very productive of his time. He was a league MVP in 1991. He led the NFL in total yards from scrimmage 4 consecutive years and became one of only 4 running backs to rush for 1,000 yards or more in 8 straight seasons. So when this book was written by this guy, Steve Silverman, he was 12th all time in rushing career yards. So his best game in the Super Bowl obviously was against the Giants. He had ran for 135 yards. He caught 5 passes, 55 yards. So he did his thing, but that was his best performance in the Super Bowl, because after that he did not play that well. Matter of fact, he could not find his helmet again in the Super Bowl in 26. So, he did a lot of, great things despite all that. He was one of the best versatile running backs to play the game, because he was quick, he was smooth with his moves. He had the ability to fake defenders out of position with a head fake or just look to the outside. He had the ability to cut quickly and had defenders playing on their heels. But his best seasons was in 1991 and 1992, when he led the league in total yards from scrimmage both seasons. He rushed for 1,407 yards, averaged 4.9 yards per attempt in 1991. He caught 62 passes for 631 yards, and he rushed for 1,487 yards, and he caught 58 passes for 626 yards. So, he was very productive. Despite not winning the Super Bowl, he did his thing, Thurman Thomas. So, move on from there. Next on his list is another great back that Steve Silverman talked about on his list was Eric Dickerson. Eric Dickerson was a unique back, man, because he could run upside, just an upside running back. His stride was just impeccable. He broke into the NFL just making an impact right away, 1983. He broke the NFL record for rushing yards in a single season in his second year. Only in his second year, he was able to smash that record. And over his first 7 seasons, he posted 11,226 rushing yards in his career. This was like over his first 7 NFL seasons. But the thing about him, he had to deal with holdouts, slights, and the frequent moves that he made. It kind of kept him from becoming the player he might have been. I still think he one of the greatest backs. I think it's just maybe not appreciated enough. Even Walter Payton admired Dickerson because of his smooth running ability and his style that he ran with. Um, he was a dominant running back. Eric Dickerson, he was an All Hall of Famer in 1999, rightly so. He came out of a rookie class in 1983 that was all about the running, the quarterback, whether it's John Elway, Jim Kelly, Dan Marino. That was the year of the quarterback, but the top running back that year out of that class was Eric Dickerson. He went to Southern Methodist University, was selected second overall by the Los Angeles Rams. So, one of the best runs that he had in his career was against the Jets when he ran 85 yards for a touchdown. His rookie season, he ran for 1,808 yards, which was a record for rookies. 390 carries. He posted 18 rushing touchdowns, which was a record for rookies at the time. Also, he caught 51 receptions out of the backfield, which was amazing. So he was that do-it-all running back at the time, Eric Dickerson. So he had that unique running style, because he defied, convention. He defied NFL logic because he ran the ball with a straight up stance. He ran the ball straight up. So instead of crouching and making himself low, or as he prepared to cut, Dickerson would run fully and erect and seemingly leave himself as a target for linebackers and defensive backs. So he was solid at that, and he never got hit with the full out shots that other backs took. He had the ability to have that acceleration when he sensed the contact was about to come. He knew he was about to get hit, but he would try to turn it up another notch and make a move before he got hit. So but in 1984, he ran for 2,105 yards to set the record that was set by O.J. Simpson in 1973, I think it was. His first 4 seasons, he averaged 1,750 yards, which is amazing. This Eric Dickerson guy. And the amazing thing about this guy is that he played with the Raiders. He was traded to the Indianapolis Colts, and then he ended his career as a Falcon. But overall, he ran for 13,259 rushing yards. He averaged 4.4 yards per carry, including 96 total touchdowns. So, overall, man, Eric Dickerson was one of the most talented, effective backs the game has ever seen. And plus, this is a list right here where Eric Dickerson was number 1 in most yards rushing in his first 8 years in his career. He carried the ball 2,616 times for 11,903 yards, averaged 4.6 a carry, including 86 touchdowns. So this guy was a dominant player for an 8-year period, his first 8 years in the league. Okay, we coming down to the end of this podcast. Did a great job of just looking through it. Yeah, I'll continue with this theme tomorrow, looking back at the running backs from this book that this guy wrote, Steve Silverman, who wrote a book that I bought called Who's Better, Who's Best in Football, looking at the top 60 NFL players of the past 60 years. So without further ado, this is Rashad Mitchell for the Rashad Mitchell's show. This is the Rashad Mitchell Show. I'd like to thank everybody for listening, who's listening now, or those who are listening later. Without further ado, I'll talk to you tomorrow, doing my podcast tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Until then, God bless.